Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Rise Urban Nation. And I'm glad to be in the same presence. I know he said he's glad to be in my presence, but I'm glad to be in his presence. And wait till you hear the name of what his organization is and what he's doing. It's just so powerful. Aaron Johnson is in the building, ladies and gentlemen. How are you doing this morning? Well, not this morning. I should say this evening. Look, my whole time schedule is off.
No problem.
Because my family came into town, and you know when family comes into town, they got you all around the city, trying to take them to all the places that they haven't been, but you don't go because you live here.
Mm-hmm. I know the feeling.
So welcome to the podcast, sir. Now, for those who haven't had the pleasure of meeting you, Aaron Johnson, I would like to ask a deep and profound question. You can go as far as wide as you want.
Mm-hmm.
Who is Aaron Johnson?
Yeah. Who is Aaron Johnson? For me, I think of myself as I am the middle of five. I had a big family, and I grew up, and that shaped a big portion of who I am, so close to all my siblings. And so I think of myself right now, I think of myself as a very grounded, focused, African heritage man that's trying to empower folks that feel missed. And so I kind of start there because I felt like even though I had a powerful family, growing up in a predominantly white community, I felt missed. And so for me, who I am right now is someone that's really grounding into using simple, and I would say sometimes radical ideas to help us see and connect deeply and build village, build community. And so for me, holistic resistance and grief to action, and all the projects I'm working on are kind of centered around that part. So who am I? I think of myself as really a person trying to bridge from folks that are oftentimes missed to folks that have resource in village, and kind of bring those together. And so for me, I'm a bridge. I'm a connector. I love connecting. I love questions, and I love being close. And I think allowing the tender parts of ourselves to reveal themselves in our connection. So a lot of my work will kind of filter towards that direction eventually. So that's kind of who I am right now, and really also feeling very grounded in, I think, the pace of. It looks like magic to me that's evolving in my life, and that feels like an important place to define a portion of me as really allowing that magic to flow into my world. And that feels like a kind of jumping off point of where I'm at right now and who I am as a being on this planet in America in this era of time.
Yeah, I love that. Now, you're going to have to break down this term to me, holistic resistance. That's the first time I've ever seen those two words intertwined and beautifully said, and it just rolled off your tongue so magically. What is this term, and how do you describe it in the work that you are doing?
Yeah, there's a way in which when I looked at the civil rights movement and all the ways we try and just speak truth to power and dismantle oppression, I realized that sometimes there is a way we would march, right? And I really respect the march, but that's one way to resist. And there's some people say, well, boycott this. That's another way to resist. And some people might say, well, invest in Black community. That's another way to resist. And I realized that we need to resist in all the ways, holistically. And I remember that was born in a situation. I was supporting a young African heritage woman that was in college, struggling with the professor, struggling with the institution. And I remember her saying, like, I'm going to school. I'm doing the right thing. I'm here trying to survive. I mean, I'm holistically oppressed. And I remember this, like, almost out of a gut response. I was like, we got to holistically resist. And we, like, both froze. We're like, hold, snap, write that down. Like, holistically, what does that mean? What does that mean to holistically resist? We started breaking it down. Like, oh, we have to resist with our whole being. We always say you don't want to slap oppression just one way. You want to slap it and slap it going back. Don't recoil, just slap both ways. You want to be efficient in your resistance. And so holistic resistance is how do I create all of myself to resist? So I'm not just resisting on Monday when I march. I'm not resisting on Tuesday when I invest. I resist every single day that my lifestyle is an interruption to oppression. So holistic resistance is inviting us to figure out ways that we can design our lives the best we can at different levels to stop oppression from happening if we can. And so that's kind of the spirit of holistic resistance. You'll see, like, consulting, earth building, and singing. How is that all part of resistance? And it's really about having a holistic way to take on oppression with all of ourselves. And that's one thing I see happening organically in a lot of places. But for us, we want to be intentional about how do we resist with as much of ourselves as possible and continue that goal. So that's kind of the nutshell of holistic resistance.
I love that. As you were speaking about that, I realized, since George Floyd, I went to another level of holistic resistance in the work
Mm,
that I do around DEI,
yeah,
and part of it is even within myself,
yeah,
a unlearning.
yes,
I don't know if you resonate with that, but
yes,
a unlearning of certain behaviors that that no longer suit or no longer needed, that
yes,
that are also oppressive behaviors, but
yes,
I didn't know this until I had to learn to unlearn it.
yes. I totally identify with that. That's huge. Agree with that 100%.
Yeah. Like, in that same in that same breath, there's also people who are against you in this work, right? So
Yeah.
how do you overcome the thoughts of people who are against you?
I think, what I find is that anytime I see someone um, afraid or concerned, I think for myself is that village. Building village is how I
Mm,
know one of the effective ways to overcome any kind of oppressive structure. I think about from actual slavery itself to post-slavery, we constantly saw the black village, the black community coming together and take down the
mm,
impossible. We kind of want to honor like, oh, this famous basketball player, this famous president or whoever it might be that's come out of that black community. But what I also know is none of those folks came out by themselves. There was a mother, there was a village, there was a neighborhood that shaped them. And so for me, I know that when I
mm,
look at any kind of oppressive force coming towards me, I look at the village around me first. And so that's where I grab my fuel. That's where I grab my focus. That's where I grab my groundedness. And I love I've been my mother is the middle-ish, lower middle half of 13 children that were raised
mm,
in Bakersfield picking cotton in the fields back in when she was younger. And so I say that because I learned from her growing up when she had 13 siblings. They all had like 7 kids each, so you had like hundreds of folks from out of this one family, and that community is modeled for me. When you feel oppression coming towards you, build your village. When you see something big in
yeah.
front of you, build your village, right? And so for me, how I deal with oppression coming towards me, there's strategic ways I want to track my resources and track my team and track my travels, but really it's about my village and my core team. And so building that core team in that village is how I overcome and how I've even survived right now. And so to me, that has been my MO with building holistic resistance and building the Grief to Action campus and building the unrested labor. These are all places, it's all village building. I come back to the village structure. I come back to how do we build village. And so for me, that's how I take on anything that come towards me is village building. I realize that's how we are able to um, build the resources, sustain resources, think creatively.
Mm,
I always say this phrase, stay creative while taking on the impossible. That's village building. You can't be creative without a
mm.
village. So for me, my creativity has been kind of spawned in my community, and I really cherish that. So that's how I really overcome is really being able to be very skillful at village building.
Yeah, I love that. I love that village building. That's like, goes back to a old African proverb of it takes a village.
Yes.
And that's something that's been grounded in, Black, historically in African communities that I think we still take and hold with us today. That's a strong root to our survival and endurance and evolution and all that good stuff.
Mm.
But I'm at this point in life where I don't just want to survive no more. I want to thrive.
Yes.
How do we take this concept and start thriving?
Yes.
I want to be holistically
Yes.
thriving.
Yes. 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 Oh, it's beautiful.
So so give me like in your humble opinion, what does it take for us to thrive as a community so we get out of this I don't know, this less than mentality, or there's not enough. There's enough on this God-given earth for all of
Hmm.
us to have. So how do we get to this next level of thinking?
Yeah. I think about, I love holistically thriving. I love that. I'm gonna write that down. That's powerful. I think one of the things I'm holding about particularly Black community thriving is I have a practice within holistic resistance community, and we call it trauma tracking. It's not being a
Mm-hmm.
therapist to fix it. We're just tracking where the trauma hits us. And I think for me,
Mm,
I realize that I've started multiple small organizations and companies, and they have collapsed. Holistic Resistance was the first one that really expanded and sustained itself over 7 years. And I learned that when I look at Black community with magic, we're not lacking talent, we're not lacking skill, but we're also we're under therapy, we're under resourced when it comes to mental health, we're under resourced when it comes to some of those basic things. So trauma tracking, we get surprised when we can be surprised when trauma shows up and interrupts our business structure. And so for me, trauma tracking is one of the game changers in my core team building, that I realized that I remember I went to the aquarium in Long Beach, beautiful aquarium, and it's like sharks and like small fish and eels. Beautiful. I'm looking at it, why is that shark not eating that fish? What's happening? I'm sitting there kind of amazed by all these predatorial fish not eating. Like I should see blood in the water in my mind. I remember checking in with the person, like, why aren't they eating each other? Oh, everybody is fed well. Everybody is fed before we open the aquarium. Everyone has enough food. I was like, so they're not going to kill it. Oh, so now we can enjoy this kind of peaceful ecosystem. What I find is that in the Black community, we find that oppression was to starve the resource. And so we are at each other and confused why we're why we're trying to take resource from each other, because the feeding is not there. And so for me, when I'm trauma tracking, I track where the feeding, how can we feed everybody well? And how does that happen is I find to minimize my energy and my footprint. So for me, starting Holistic Resistance, I shrunk my life. I shrunk my life into a tiny house. I'm one of the few Black folks in my community, so I'm gonna live in a tiny house. It's like, what's white people? No, I'm doing that because I'm shrinking my footprint, so my resource is small enough that I can really build from that space, right? And I started learning about earth building, and natural building goes back into the Black culture for centuries, right? And in the United States, it feels like a white controlled space, but I live close to the earth, and what I find is that there's so many models in minimizing your life so then I can live very skillfully large. So I can then birth, and when I grew my organization, I grew it from me being very efficient. So I say for us to thrive, I would say shrink and be sufficient. I think a lot of folks get too big in their resource, and they aren't able to be nimble. They aren't able to have say so. I'm walking out of my job right now because I have a home space that's so efficient that I don't need to work for an oppressive boss. And that allows us to start to begin our thriving. And then as we get more stabilized, then we can start building community. So now I'm able, because my mortgage is so efficient and so small, I now can support 8 other Black folks start their businesses. This is how we can start to thrive, is think efficient, right? Think efficient and think village, and not think, well, if I have a really expensive vehicle, which is great, but when do you do that? You want to think efficient and then grow that ecosystem. So for me, I think it's about building that village around minimalism a bit. Again, holistic resisting minimalism takes you out of the, it takes you out of off that grid of ecosystem of capitalism, and allows you to birth something creative. And so for me, I think being efficient, make sure everyone gets to eat well, so we're not attacking each other, and then grow from that space of balance. So I think that's one of the things I would really emphasize is, I see small business owners and small entrepreneurs, I think that's one of the things I track as they get too big too quick. I think efficiency and being patient is a very powerful way to start to thrive very efficiently.
Yeah, this kind of reminds me of the things that I read with some other individuals that head up decolonizing wealth, taking the capitalism out of wealth building, and making it more holistic in the way we build and support. And I was man, this is going to be a great podcast. I already can tell. I'm also reminded of some village building I did 2 months ago, and in this space, it was different community leaders. We were, from who were, at different levels, whether it be in government, in community, grassroots organizations, and in the couple of structures that we were working with. We're taking through this imagining exercise of, if we didn't know what community looked like, if this wasn't here, what could it look like, right? And we talked about community gardening, right? Being the center of the community. So everybody has fresh fruits and vegetables, and everybody worked the garden, right? And then the elders would tell us how to, do certain things that help, till the garden, so that food would be bountiful. And when we went through that whole process, we saw that, nature has already provided the blueprint for us to live. Like
Yes.
there's that harvesting, there's the tilling of the soil, there's that harvesting seed, you know, season where you're putting in that work. Then there's that growth season, and then there's a season to reap what was plentiful and bountiful, so we all eat, and then go back and do it again. And if we were to use that model as our wealth building model for community building, that everybody is an equal participant, everybody gets what they need,
Yes.
and everybody feels like a valued member of society, right?
Yes. Yes. That is well
and
said.
and and so you remind me of that when you speak. And I'm thinking about the learning that needs to take place for everybody to unlearn and relearn this new way of living. Because I mean, you had it spot on with what you were saying. Um, I'm curious to know what's your favorite way to learn and why.
Mm. So education was a pretty traumatic experience for me. It's probably one of the places where I got a lot of talk about trauma tracking. School was that place for me. I went to um, a predominantly white school here in the high desert. I'm not far from you, in Southern
Mm,
California, here in a small town called Phelan. And
mm,
and for me, growing up with dyslexia, which made reading and writing difficult, it smothered how genius I was. But my mother and family were not confused. And so, we talk about my favorite way to learn. It was not in school. That was not my favorite place to learn. That was not the place, and not because they didn't try, but the whole structure was limiting, right? So I had this very
right.
dynamic mind and this very dynamic ability to communicate, but they had it kind of down to test and retesting and memorization. And I was such a creative artist, almost hopelessly, partly because of my dyslexia and partly because of how I was as a being. And so, for me, my learning, for me at least, happened when I was in the Future Farmers of America for 4 years in high school. I learned when I was raising the sheep in my house. I learned when I was building the actual structure. I learned when I was engaging, not just with my hands, my whole entire body was engaging with the
Hmm.
practice. My family had a family group called Five Aces we grew up with singing. I learned how to sing not just from like, here's your note, here's your pitch, here's your key. But I learned from sitting next to my grandfather who would sing in church, and I would hear him sing. I would sit next to my brother who's excellent. He would start to sing or beatbox. I would learn from being with, embodied, and practice. And so for me, learning was best given when it was with folks that loved me, cared about me, and allowed me to be fully myself. And that was usually at home or in my
Mm,
Black village. When I was in a classroom where folks are like, you're not that intelligent, or they're not sure, you can't pass a test, when that was a limitation, I survived. I graduated, I went to college and whatnot, but it was not a place where I felt like I kind of like just patiently wade through it. I did not learn. So my learning is with folks that teach me with love and with investment in my life. It's a lifetime reach. Those teachers that when you graduate talk to you anymore, that's fine. But I like the teachers that I'm here for
hmm.
life. I'm your mom, I'm your uncle, I'm your neighbor, I'm your village. I am here to be with you. That's where I learn. When love is being given in between the lessons, I can learn. So I thrive in that environment
Hmm.
and try and create environments where that is also where I like to teach and also creating places for us to learn myself.
Yeah, I resonate with you so wholly on that because as a kid being labeled with ADHD, like
Mm,
I didn't do my best learning in the classroom. Right, there weren't too many teachers that could, especially in big classrooms. And because I grew up in Washington D.C. in the hood,
mm,
so like those classrooms were a little oversized. So nobody has the most teachers don't have the wherewithal, energy, and creativity to work with a large classroom and a kid that is just bouncing off the walls,
mhm, mhm. Yes, yes.
or not have the attention span if you're not really super engaged in me. The only place I really was engaged in is art or woodshop class, like where my other things are being engaged in a way that allowed my attention to be focused and captured, right? Because now I'm using more than just my auditory and my visual experience. I'm using my hands, and
Mhm,
I'm embodying what I'm doing. So that's what kept my focus and intention. So I
mm.
I resonate with you, and I have a feeling that there's more people like that out there,
Yeah,
and the one system that we created for education was um hasn't evolved enough to teach the masses.
so true. So true. It's a big place where we could
But
grow as a community.
yeah, it is. Now, there's people in that same breath. There's people that have different skill sets. How do you start to connect with someone with a different skill set?
The skill set that, as far as learning, or someone like in an environment that.
Like it could be learning or doing business with. They have a different skill set from you. Like, what's the best way for you? How do you connect with someone who has a different skill set?
Yeah, for me, because my work is so diverse, I work with a lot of people that have very different, not only skill sets, but also like positionality, how they're positioned in the world, either their wealth or their education, or how they approach. And for me,
Mm-hmm.
I I take a lot of time when I build my teams to try and understand their not only learning practices, but again, back our trauma tracking here, is where their edges are. I want to know where their edges are, as far
Mm-hmm.
as their where they not just get upset. That's like one small place, but really where they start to get collapsed, or how they handle folks that have big personalities, or how they bring their where they're thriving at. I think specifically when I think of skill sets, because I do consulting, and I also do like natural building. I do a lot of like singing. I do a lot of like meditation. So we do a variety of things. So I might be working with a videographer who's extremely skilled at videography. He's also very quiet and shy. He's like behind the camera. He's not going to speak up a lot. We have a lot of big performers talking very large, talking really loud, and have big energy. I'm trauma tracking the room, going, oh, he's shrinking. He's getting really quiet. So for me, I start to kind of calm the room down. Say, hey, what's going on? Let's we can track our videographer who's getting overwhelmed by all this big performing energy, because he's not that energy. And I also have oftentimes photographers or videographers that come into a space that are also big personalities, and the subjects, the performers are really quiet and also kind of sensitive, and they're overwhelmed. So for me, I'm always tracking the design of someone's um, how they position themselves and how they drop into
Mm-hmm.
their personality in an environment. So I'm kind of like a container tracker. I really track a room or a space to have uh, all personalities and all energies are welcomed, at the same time that we can be in communication about when it feels hurt and when it feels at edge. And I'm also tracking the body communication as well. So for me, I'm really a body reader, I'm a heart reader, and I'm a heart connector. And so that's how I kind of build out. And oftentimes I'll have a videographer or any kind of a person, I'm going to be a videographer or even a co-facilitator that's highly
Mm-hmm.
skilled, but their not only their attitude, but their energy is slightly like arrogant or self-centered. It's a little bit. They're highly skilled though. You might have someone that's not as quite as skilled as them, but their heart is grounded. Their heart is grounded. I
Yeah.
will take the grounded heart over the talent every single time, because I find that when people are grounded in their heart, we will rise to the occasion to do our best work. And
Uh-huh.
if we're a little arrogant and self-centered, oftentimes we'll get knocked down, and we'll stumble in ways that are unnecessary. So for me, I find I
Uh-huh.
always track heart. I track heart. I track their ability to communicate their heart and show up in a really real way, more so than their skill
Uh-huh.
set and talent. And I love talent. I appreciate talent, but that doesn't lead me. But it's definitely something I hold second, right under, is where their heart is. And that's where I try and drop into my village building, into my community building, into my professional world as well.
Nah, you know, I'm an energy guy, so you said I was like, man, whoever's leading this, that's a lot of energy to hold and a lot of space to hold for it. Like so many different people and be able to track it at one time. Like, I'm like, how do you do that? That's a gift in itself.
Yeah.
Like you have a gift because
Mm,
like like I was like, man, I'm trying to think of the times I hold space. Like, can I, like, am I able to hold space and track at the same time?
mm,
Because even with tracking trauma, like I'm learning that I hold trauma too,
yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
and sometimes I'm holding trauma that I didn't even know I was holding
Yeah.
until I unpack it.
Yes.
Like it may have been passed down to me from generations
Hmm.
and generations and
Yeah.
generations of ancestry, and I may not even know where it came from until I unpack a conversation with my mom. Like, oh,
Mm,
that's where that came from. That's
yes.
why I have this underlining trigger here that I didn't know where it came from.
Hmm.
It's because this is what she had passed down to me. Does that
Hmm.
make sense
That makes
genetically?
perfect sense.
Because
Perfect sense.
the and so sometimes some people don't even know the trauma they hold. They they
No.
they, they know they have a trauma here, but it's something that they don't even know where it comes from. They don't know it exists. So like, how do you hold space for that? Like if you're tracking somebody who has a trauma but doesn't even understand that they have a trauma or where that trauma is coming from.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, in entrepreneurship, it's rampant. I think for a lot of us that
Uh-huh.
are trying to build a business, sometimes in environments that aren't ideal, I think the majority of Black
Mm,
folks that I work with that are building business never been like, oh yeah, someone gave me $100,000 and I got to build my business at will. It's like they had to build it from a place of struggle, and it actually gives us somewhat of an advantage at times because our trauma does give us some advantage. Of Black folks, we've learned how to take on opposition, take on the nuances of building stuff that's never been seen before, maybe the first time in their family. So for me, I think when we're talking about trauma tracking, one of the most important things to do is to be kind to ourselves in that process and to be kind to others. And so I have a statement when I'm working on some of the projects. I say, that's a trauma-led experience, right? And so people say, what do you mean by trauma-led? Well, I'll just say this real quick. I mean, you can go on any kind of um, social media platform and see a lot of trauma-led experiences. We don't even know what's happening. But I would say we look at uh, folks that are successful, named Tyler Perry or Oprah Winfrey's easy ones to grab that we all might know. Um,
mm-hmm.
we hear their early stories of living in their car and trying to get it done. That is shaping their fortitude, is shaping how they shape their employees. And so for me, it's this ability not to necessarily look at all trauma as bad or something to run from, but also a place to say it's part of our shaping story. And can we hold it thoughtfully and not let it get in our way? And I say that getting in our way. And for myself, I grew up, both my parents were pastors. My dad was a welder and a pastor. He worked Monday through Saturday, and then he went to church and worked on Sunday, and we're back on Monday, got up at 4 o'clock in the morning. His energy was work. They didn't start unless he got work. And so that was a good mentality, but there was no rest, right? There was no
Mm,
rest in his dynamic. And a lot of our generation now is tracking like, when do we rest? How do we build rest into it? So the trauma was work hard. I got that part. Now, as I tracked myself, I said, I need to figure out how to rest in my
mm-hmm.
good work, in my unstoppable energy. I have to learn how to rest. My health is dependent upon it. And so for me, I think there's a level of balancing when trauma is leading the space and when we can identify it and slow it down. A therapist can go in the deep about it, but we also, as a community, can track and go, let us have a non-trauma led experience. So if I'm in a conflict, if I'm in a conflict with my employees or even someone I'm consulting with, and I always tell everyone in my workshops that I will never yell at you in anger. I will never I have
Mm-hmm.
a very naturally big voice and trained big voice, but I will never yell at you in anger. And they look at me and go, oh snap. And I said, you might yell at me in anger, but I understand if I'm screaming at you as a consultant, then I am no longer in a healing led experience. I'm in a trauma led experience here. So some people have normalized verbal abuse to the point they don't even realize that when they're in their conflicts, that they're in a trauma led experience. And that's normalized to the point they just kind of run through the world that way. And so for us as trauma trackers, to slow it down and go, what is a better way for us to see and hold each other in village? And so for us, I look at trauma tracking and look at building the spaces of not beating ourselves too much about it. It's really about slowing down and saying, how can
Mm-hmm.
I track where trauma is shaping me in a good way and give me some opportunities to do some good work, and where it's also hurting me. And so for me, it's kind of find that balance in the Black community, and in particular Black entrepreneurship. It's a powerful place for us to really get humble and get quiet about how do we support ourselves holistically, going back to that kind of theme, and
Mm-hmm.
not just showing up being a good employee or showing up being a good CEO or whatever it might be, but really showing up and saying, I want to be a whole self. I want to have access to my tears and good therapy and also good work.
Yeah, thank you for also sharing that story about your dad, like and reminding us the importance of rest. Something I learned this year from another young lady who does this work. She told me rest is restorative and revolutionary.
Mm,
Mm, I felt that rest is restorative and revolutionary uh, because we don't come we weren't from a culture of rest, and at
yes.
least if you're Black in America, right?
No. No.
And so this new idea of rest, what it brought up for me is you know centering rest in the wellness journey and centering health, because health is wealth. And so when I started
Mm,
looking at the cornerstones for wealth for our community, it's not just about money. It's like there's mental health, which is wealth, a wealth building pillar. Mental health, spiritual health, physical health,
yeah.
and all those other things that really make you wealthy, right?
Yes.
Or
Yes.
build wealth. Um, so, with that being said, what have you learned about yourself in the past year?
Oh my goodness. This has been a year of learning for me on multiple levels. And I think especially when you said something earlier in the podcast about holistically thriving. I love that phrase. It's kind of sticking with me as a theme quietly in the background of my heart here. And I think that when I think of entrepreneurship or starting a business or doing things that are off the beaten path of my lessons of this year, and I have learned that the things that are ungoogleable, I say ungoogleable, I I do a lot of work with young African heritage men,
Mm-hmm.
and we were doing an earth building. We were doing an earth building project, and I remember seeing one of the men was it's about 100 it's 105 degrees outside. It was pretty warm. It was hard work, and one of the men just started grieving, started weeping. And I remember going over to him, just checking out, how you doing? I'm good. I'm good. Just working with this earth and plastering, and just I said this big emotion come over me. And I said, let's pause. Let's pause. Grab a seat. Let's sit down. He's like, I won't finish my job. I said, no, just don't rush here. We can just sit down and relax. And I sat down, just listen to him share what was moving through his body. And I remember thinking to myself, this is ungoogleable. Two black men sitting here, one's crying and one's listening, and one is having feelings by doing some natural work with the earth. And I say that because what I've learned, and you said this earlier, is how nature constantly is a teacher for us. And for me, I live in the desert, so I have a lot of access to the land and to earth. I'm on 11 acres. Um, and so I walk the land on a regular basis. And I was sitting back writing about this year, and I had 8 deaths this year in my community. Eight
Mm-hmm.
deaths in my community. And folks that grow up in different levels of poverty or adjacent to poverty, death is unfortunately not far away. And what I've learned is one particular death that really, really hit me in the chest this year was my dear aunt. She lives in Canada. She died late last year, but her funeral wasn't until early this year, February. And I really sat with. She was want to write a book, and
Mm-hmm.
she said, "I'm going to go to college and finish this master's degree. Then I'm going to write this book after." And she died in the process of getting her degree. And I'm not against college or anything else, but I wish she would have wrote that book first. She was highly qualified. She was 65 years old, had a lifetime of wisdom, and was waiting to write her book. And one thing I learned is I cannot wait for my magic to come through my body. I cannot
Mm-hmm.
wait and this is kind of a common lesson, but to me, it really hit home when I saw her book not get written, to saw her magic get cut short. And so for me, one of the lessons I took out of this year is it's time to move right now, right now.
Mm-hmm.
And the other piece I learned this year is I remember I do consulting. I was doing consulting for this organization. We're in the mountains, and I was helping them think about diversifying their environment. And I was doing it through sound and music, and we were singing. And I remember get done with this singing circle and grounding exercise, and I leave, and this woman grabs me after and says, "Aaron, I loved your share, and I have this land I need to give to a Black-led organization." And I was like, "Oh, that's great. Yeah, getting back and use my number. I'll talk to you later." People kind of say a lot of things to me in passing, and then of course, 6 months, 4 months go by, 3 months go by, and I get a call. She says, "Aaron, you didn't respond to my emails. I have this land I'm trying to give away." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" Well, yeah, I remember now. And she had an email I had missed, and I looked in that email, and the short of the story is she has 188 acres in Northern California
Mm-hmm.
that she wants to give over to Black folks, to particularly me, to be specific, particularly me. And I say that because not just Black folks, but I said, like, what do I do with 188 acres that has these beautiful natural buildings on them? It's a beautiful site. It's off grid. It's amazing. But what I learned is I asked myself, I'm a minimalist. I live in a tiny house. I'm trying to
Mm-hmm.
do profound Pacific work. I want to support Black Village. This is what I do for my work. This is part of that grand exercise it was. And through that share, I'm now in the process of acquiring 180 acres that
Mm-hmm.
we're going to do Black writing retreat, creative retreats on in Northern California. And what I've learned from that, though, is not wait. Let's not wait
Mm-hmm.
for your magic to flow. And I remember that event I went to. I thought, I don't know if I want to go to this event. It's up in the hills. It's like a lot of white folks. It's a lot of stress. I was like, but I love what they're trying to do. Let me go up there and do this short workshop series and consult workshop. I had no idea that was going to be a seed planet that potentially will allow Black artists, creatives, thinkers to have a retreat space that's not it's accessible, that
Mm-hmm.
is allowing us to thrive and grow. So what I've learned here, what I learned is let your magic flow right now. If you're a speaker,
Mm-hmm.
teacher, creative, writer, do it right now. And
Mm-hmm.
maybe check your email when people say they're going to try to do something for you. Check your emails to make sure that you can be able to follow up with magic. But the ultimate narrative here is that you don't need to wait.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need to wait for your magic to flow. And I know that's something that probably heard a lot, but I think in the context of Black community entrepreneurship, There's a time we
Mm-hmm.
almost want to wait until we get that grant and wait until we have all the resources. And I think it's important to have some of the tools. But I say start making magic right now from where you are. And that's one of the things I learned this year. And the last thing I'll say this year is that building a team of people around you that can not only stay at the tempo that you're at, but also is not intimidated when your tempo speeds up. They can keep pace
Mm-hmm.
with your flow of creativity and keep pace with your flow of expansive, and they don't get overwhelmed by that. And so the folks that have the ability to not get terrified of progress and not get terrified of powerful pivots, especially when you're talking about building things that we haven't seen in maybe our family lineage, and folks that can handle that level of let's
Mm-hmm.
create and dream of something we've never seen in 100 years of our family lineage. And that I think is so important. I learned this year is really building that around me. It's been transformative. And I
Yeah.
sit here at the end of this year moved about next year, but based upon that practice has been one of the biggest shifts I made and learned this year.
Those are some beautiful lessons. I often think about you. You made me think about. I had a conversation with another young man the other day who had just the wrong circle around him, and I used to be one of those guys too. So I had the wrong circle
Mm-hmm.
around me.
Mm-hmm.
I told him, like, look, if you look at your circle and you're not inspired, you don't have a circle. You got a cage.
Mm.
You need to have people who can move at your tempo, as you say, at your pace, and then inspire you to
Yes.
dream even bigger and move even faster than you thought you could ever imagine to move. Um, and another story I want to share with you is, like, I was talking to another gentleman who I'm still trying to get to this day on the podcast. Now I think about it, and he told me the story about how he was, did one of the African DNA changed his lineage. He went over to Africa, where the
Mm.
town where it said he was from, and then he met his tribal community and come out to find out that he was part of this royalty community, and then they gave him, like, I don't know, like over 100 something acres, and he's like, I don't know, what am I
Stop.
going to do this? I was like, it's yours, you're part of the.
Mm.
And then he's like, just take it. That they said, God will provide, right? And then he
Yes.
gets back to the
Yes.
States and he's talking to some business partners. He's like, we're thinking about, doing some investments over here. We want to build this, that, over in Africa near this place. And it happened to be, oh, well, I got 100 acres. If
Stop.
I get it. And then that's why, like, just do your magic. The rest,
Yes.
the universe, God, whatever you believe in, is going to provide the rest. And
Yes.
so I've seen this twice in two different stories in my life now. The other
Mm.
gentleman I told you about, and now you. So
Mm.
I'm inspired by your stories. Something you alluded to earlier too was you started to talk a little bit about grounding, and I'm curious, what grounds you when you have to make a tough decision?
Yeah, that is, I found that grounding is best done before you actually have to do the work. I find that I have to get up and ground. I don't know what I'm about to do, right? I don't even know if it's gonna be a hard day or not, if tragedy will strike, but I get up every day and ground. I think ground to me is an cumulative effect on my life, right? So I don't want to
Mm-hmm.
see the shock happen and go, I need to go get grounded. I have to kind of continuously be in a grounded state in my life design. And so for me, I work with the earth a lot. I do a lot of clay building. I do a lot of cob building. The cob is a mixture of sand, clay, and straw together. And I have probably all around me. Any given spot, I have a clay ball right here. Before I got on the call with you, I got this little clay ball here in my hand. I was just holding it, just kind of rubbing it in my hand. And I ground with clay often. When I do workshops, I don't care if I'm in a corporate building or outside in nature, I oftentimes come with a bucket of clay balls to hand out to people to ground in. So for me, having some earth in my hands, when I talk to my mentees, I say, when we die, we don't turn into our cell phones. We turn into this right here, this clay right here. And they kind of laugh
Mm-hmm.
for a moment and go, "Oh snap, that's real. That's us. That's us." And so for me, I carry in my backpack, fanny pack, airport, a little bit of clay in my hands. And so for me, it's a simple daily meditation practice. I do a lot of
Mm-hmm.
I have a lot of rosemary growing on our land here, and so oftentimes dry it and burn like an incense and just be with singing. I'm a singer. I love sound. I love humming. So for me, I'm a simple singer. My sister has this beautiful song she's written many, but this song I love a lot. The phrase in there, it says, "Lay your heart on my soul. It's like part of the chorus. Lay your heart on my soul. It's this beautiful song that kind of talks about being as close as possible. And I love that phrase. So I just like sing that little mantra to myself. What does it
Mm-hmm.
mean to lay my heart on someone's soul? Even if someone's like stole
Mm-hmm.
money or hurt my heart or collapsed a big part of my project, what does it mean to still see them in their full humanity and not just be in a revenge state or just in an anger, depressed state? So for me, that
Mm-hmm.
little phrase that my sister wrote in that song, lay your heart on my soul, and this little clay ball here is almost my go-to meditation on a regular basis that I do on a daily basis, and that accumulates to me a grounded behavior that allows me then when the things hit, I can almost be already in a posture of groundedness and not have to scramble to get to there. And that doesn't always happen that way, but for me in my current last 2 years or so, it's been a place where I have been designing my life where I have the time and space to regularly ground, and that's been how it's really helped me. Is um, I can ground standing, sitting, but ultimately I love sitting with some clay, preferably in a nature environment. But oftentimes I'm on a plane or in a bus or somewhere I can't always get
Mm-hmm.
there. But if I get my feet on the ground somewhere, that is huge. And the last thing I do is I've been sledding. There's a workout track athletes do a lot. When I was in college, track is like a sledge, like a harness or a belt on. You pull it. It's like you put weight on. I did it originally as part of my workout, and now I do it as a part of my prayer meditation. Like literally, I take off my shoes. Earlier today, I take off my shoes. I have a little desert path, and I get 80, 90 pounds. I just walk with that sled, and it is such a relief, a stress reliever, but also a grounding experience. And it's great for my cardiovascular, but it's also great for my spirit. So for me, I have been sledding probably the last year as a part of my
Mm-hmm.
meditation as well. And so those are the things I do when I get a call about, hey, Aaron, you're now acquiring 180 acres to be part of this big project. I'll go get the sled. I'll go get on a sled and just kind of take 20 minutes
I
and
love
then
that.
maybe sit with the clay ball. So that's my practice.
I love it. I love. I'm gonna try to adopt one of those. I'm not sure which one yet, but you got some great practices. For those who get the visual experience, if you watch this on our YouTube channel, even the atmosphere around him, I feel is
Mm,
grounding. When we enter the call, you have some beautiful artwork behind you. You have
mm.
the it looks like that's rosemary behind you and some earth
It is.
elements
It is.
behind you as
It
well.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I knew, like, soon as I got on the call, I knew I was at peace with my brother.
Mm, mm,
And I felt
mm,
grounded just being in the conversation. I was like, oh,
mm.
we about to have a real dialogue today.
Ah, snap. That's beautiful.
So I want to get into a little bit into the steps that kind of brought you down here. But before we do that, I always like to start off with this question, and I ask folks, because a lot of people when they begin their journey, they have this idea of where it is they want to go, and they fall in love with the goal. And I tell them, listen, fall in love with the journey, because
Mm,
the goal may change. So fall in love with the journey, and what that take, and don't ignore that journey, because that journey is going to shape you into what you need to be,
yes.
for that future that you're going to take on. And some of our students, sometimes when I talk to high school, college students, they like get into this mindset, like, yeah, I got this job now, I got this degree, I'm gonna go into this and do this, I'm gonna be making good money, or I'm gonna, whatever it is that the dream that they were sold on, and it doesn't always work that way. So
Mm,
what was your first job is the
yeah.
question, so that they could see, like, look, this is where it started.
Yeah. Yes. For me, my first job was I graduated from Chaffey Junior College right here in Inland Empire, and
uh,
I got a job at Dodger Stadium as fan photo, taking photos of fans.
I would have
Um,
never guessed that.
Fan photos. The fluorescent green shirt. Fans come in and you say you want to take a picture for they sell it to them later or something, and you harass a lot of the fans that come in the door. You get a whole lot of no's, a whole lot of yeses. Um, and I at the same time was building my first entrepreneurship. I was working for Fan Photo, which is it was what it was. Um, I had my first photography company, so I was like, I'm my own company. I'm gonna be a freelance photographer. Um, and this is I feel old because 2005, I think film was just still a professional tool and digital was just coming in. Um, and uh, and I got my first company, Black Ant Photography. Black Ant
Ah,
Photography was my first kind of entrepreneurship. I was working at Fan Photo, and then I would do my own business, and I was trying to get weddings and headshots, and you're in LA because Dodger Stadium.
Yeah.
In LA, you get headshots and models and actors, and you get famous photographers. That was my goal. It was my goal. I didn't shoot any famous people. I did a couple of red carpets for a couple other photographer companies, but I started as a freelance photographer and videographer, and I went from JP Junior College is an amazing art program, the amazing art and photography program, one of the best photography
Oh,
junior college
really?
programs I know. Actually, just note to self, folks that want to get into photography, I definitely would endorse the staff and skill set of those at Chafee Junior College. And so there's a couple of folks there at the time I was there that went to Cal Arts, and those don't know what Cal Arts is. A pretty competitive art school in Los Angeles, or right outside of Los Angeles in Valencia.
Okay.
And I went from Chafee Junior College, in California, Chafee Junior College, and I got accepted to Cal Arts, partly because there's a powerful staff there, and I kept my photography business alive. But that was my first job where I was like, oh snap, I now have a small company. And I remember there's several stories, but I will say that there was a story where I got a client, and he was like, do you do digital photography? And I was like, of course. And I had done digital photography at Chafee with their cameras, but I actually owned at the time my own digital camera. And I was like, of course, I can I have a digital camera. And I remember him saying, well, how much do you charge for this first, he had a website he was building. And I said, I was looking in my head, how much does a camera cost at Costco? The D50. I was like, 600. I said the number of the camera, $650. He's like, great. He wrote me a check for $650. I love that. I left with him with that check, cashed the check, went over to Costco and bought me a digital camera. And by the time he got me this product, I went back and shot him. I kept him for about 5 years as a client. He was a really great client. But I remember he got me my first digital camera. I was shooting with film before that point. But I love that kind of birthing from not having enough money to buy my first camera, getting that client first, he give me a check, and I go and get that camera, and then I started working. I didn't start working. That camera paid for itself 1,000 times over. But it was a great entry
Wow.
point to start my own business.
That's beautiful. And probably all the lessons you learned along the way that helped you build what you currently have today. So let's talk about how the current business you do was birthed, and tell a little bit about that story.
Yeah. So holistic resistance, it's funny because it started with photography and video. Actually, what happened was there was a organization in Palm Springs that they had a budget, and they had an idea to try and bring someone that could work with Black folks, young Black students, and teach them videography and photography, and also teach them about empowering them as Black folks. And I was doing a mentorship program at the time, and I was like, yeah, I'm a professional photographer. I'm kind of getting out of that kind of anyway, and I totally empower young people. I have a mentorship program here. So I went to this program, and they said, hey, can you, before we start this program, we need someone to do like a DEI workshop for us to work on how we can think about as white leadership, how we can bring Black folks into our organization. Can you do that for us? I was like, yeah, I can do that. I've done versions of that in the streets. I think so. I didn't have a website or even a philosophy, but I understood what they were asking of me. And I was like, I'm going to stay creative here. And I remember doing that workshop with them. And it was principal, superintendent, some students, some Black faculty. And I did a workshop for them. It was a 6-hour workshop, and it went really well. And I was like, oh, snap. This photography and empowering students is really powerful, but this workshop thing was really powerful. And that workshop went really well. And as things unfold, this is Obama era, I'll give you a timeline. I said, the program collapsed. The powerful, beautiful program for the young Black folks making video collapsed. And it stayed with me of like, that workshop I taught when I first got that job was actually not only easeful for my DNA and how I work and how I communicate, but it was powerful working with such different folks. We have a student here and a superintendent. We have a principal and a teacher's assistant. We have the dynamics in that room. A famous, film producer in the same room was kind of head of the whole program. And I was working with these personalities. Like, I could do this. And so I sat down and said, I think I want to really, really hone into that. And I birthed at that point holistic resistance. Now, this is before we knew Trump was coming. I didn't know that was about to happen. I was just like realizing this dynamic work I was doing needed to work on this material. And so I made the name. I recommend we not do it this way. I made the name and started working without getting an LLC and without having the actual business and tax yet. I was like, people were calling. I was like trying to do some work here and there. I wasn't quite putting the business model together, and I thankfully was able to slow down because someone wrote me a check. Someone wrote me a check for $1,000 to Holistic Resistance. And I was like, I can't cash this check, because I took the check and put a push pin on the wall. And I called and then finally opened up an LLC so I can cash that check. And I think what's important about that is that I learned backwards. Black folks weren't going to business school. I was coming from photography entrepreneurship to a consulting
Right.
company without a coach. So that's what I name that. It's building a business. You don't always have all the tools in place. But again, make your magic. Make your magic. So
Right.
I remember opening up my LLC, and I remember talking to the guy. He's like, California is doing an LLC corporation. He's like, oh, I think it's holistic. It's here. I was like, oh, I was hoping it was available. He goes, here's your business ID number. And I ran to the bank, opened up an account, cashed a check, and learned that I need to start building from that point for reals. And so I really got serious. And what happened, I didn't know, is we started getting close to the end of Obama era, and I was a pretty small, me and one other person for like maybe a year and a half. And right coming into the end of Obama era, it started exploding and consulting and working. And I started to really diversify. I realized that consulting was one thing about DEI, but also realized there's so many other places I need to work. So I was working with a mentorship program, got immersed into it. So I have the Chronically UnderTouched Project, which I'm working on right now. I have the Unrested Labor, which is part of that land project. I have, so these all came from this nest egg of consulting, right? And then I started touring workshops, reaching for blackness and building village and singing and sound. So that all started kind of emerging out of holistic resistance. So it started with that kind of first job that collapsed over in Palm Springs and emerged into the consulting, and now it diversified into where we are now with a variety of ways to holistically resist in so many ways.
Now, I love that whole story. Now, I know that, somebody's going to listen to this and they're going to get inspired by your story, because there's many people who want to holistically resist. And, our community, we're such a talented and gifted community. We're artistic, we're communicative, we like, there's so many different talents. And so what would you say were like the key steps that you took to help really, take your creativity, your talents and this vision to turn it into a thriving and successful business? What would you say were the key steps?
It's interesting, because one of the things I think is maybe not spoke to enough is my ability to communicate, to talk. Not just talk, but to speak, not just eloquent. That's not even it. It's being able to convey an idea out of your body into the world through your mouth. Like, it's to be able to move a group of people with your voice is something that I am so glad. My mother is a trained speaker and trained all 5 of us kids how to speak. She actually probably trains all to be preachers, but nonetheless, we were trained to speak. I got so upset at my mom sometimes about how she really honed our speaking skills. And now, as I'm a professional, I find that one of the things I find that grow an idea is your ability to tell your story clearly and profoundly is by far one of the biggest game changers in my growing my business and expanding. Some people are natural communicators. What's good about communicating is a trained skill that can be taught to, and you can learn it. The second thing is energy management. I don't mean just like, oh, I want to go to sleep on time, which is good, get your sleep. But I have found that for myself, my organization expanded when I use my energy efficiently. I want to be articulate when I say that, not just efficient like, oh, wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning. But I mean by that is that my mental, how I hold stress or trauma in my mind can take up so much space that my creativity gets smothered. And so for me, I have learned how to grow my business by making sure that my mind has space for creativity to thrive. And unfortunately, public education and most environmental education often don't give you space in your mind for creativity to thrive. And entrepreneurship is so much based on creativity. And so for me, I would say speaking, practice that skill, get better at it, always refine that, and have space in your mind for creativity to grow. That was a game changer for myself. I couldn't even invented the idea of holistic resistance and the camp we have here, nonprofit, to Grief to Action, and the Unrested Labor. None of that could have grown if I didn't have space in my mind and heart for creativity to thrive. And the last thing I would say is being consistent. I know we see this all the time on Instagram and speakers, but consistency is foundational. And I think for myself, I've learned after starting and failing a lot of times that consistency is something I have found to be fundamentally critical. And I say consistent, not just openly, but I say consistently around my rest, consistently around my healthcare for myself, consistently around my meditation, consistently around my networking, consistently around how I show up for folks. How consistent I show up
Mhm.
reliably for my village. People that know me say, "Hey, Aaron is a reliable energy," and that
Mhm.
to me has been without those elements, I would not be anywhere close to where I'm at right now.
Yeah, I love that. As we see more people in the Black community embrace a holistic way of living, we see more Black people, caring about therapy, caring about, their health, both mental health and physical health. There's a lot of people who kind of practice this, just on their own. Like they have different modalities or ideas on how to holistically heal and build. What some advice would you give to someone who would like to start a career or a business in this industry?
Yeah, I think for me, it's I think humility is also a medicine here. I think that
Mm,
no matter how skilled or talented you are, humility is going to be foundationally um, a powerful entry point into being effective. Your networking will be so much more profoundly effective. The folks that are drawn to you will be folks that are here to really support you, not pull you down. So I think humility, if you're going to get
mhm,
into consulting, you're going to get into some of the radical work that we're doing here at Holistic Resistance with the Chronically UnderTouched Project, that kind of material takes humility. And I think the second thing it takes is a level of focus. And I say focus not in a way of just like I want to um bench 400 pounds, I'm going to do it, but focus is really about letting your emotion nervous system settle and
mhm,
allow what your talents are emerge without being forced, without being yelled at or screamed at or forced at. Allow it to emerge. Allow yourself to allow your talents to emerge. And I find to me that is one of the most powerful things my mother did for us and our 5 children. We were all profound individuals, but she didn't force us to be as good as our sibling or look at so and so's doing. She said, "Allow you're gonna bloom what you're gonna bloom. Allow yourself to grow." And so for me, I would say, allow yourself space to hone your speaking skills,
mhm,
hone your ability to stay in a humble posture and to be in a place of not humbled like I don't have pride in my good work, but humble in the sense of I understand I am in constant state of learning. I'm in
mhm,
constant state of learning. And then I think the last thing I'll say is uh, uh, take networking out of this kind of pressure. Here's my card, and take networking into a place of I am actually trying to find out place I have a heart connection with folks. I want to learn how to deeply see and understand who people actually are
mhm,
and not the persona they put up and present, and really get
mhm,
used to that heart connection. That to me is going to be huge because the work that we're doing around oppression is life threatening work. It's work that can put you in the hairs of folks that want to
mhm,
destroy your magic and destroy your thinking around liberation for Black folks. And so for me, um, the more you're able to drop into not only your ancestral lineage of support, but drop into your own magic of what you're actually capable of, not what the teacher says you're capable of, not what society, but you what you're actually capable of. That can emerge, and that can have a container of humility and of patience and of focusing on um, a network of folks that I'm connected with their hearts. I mean, that's in place. That to me
mhm,
will have you thrive in our industry and in consulting and anti-oppressive work. In a way that I see most people miss. And I think
mm.
in this context, I think people that do that are thriving, not only in our industry, but almost in any industry. They're doing really well with those tools.
I love that. I love that. When you look at the future, what do you think the future has in store for this industry?
You know, everything. I mean, in the sense of like, one of the work people say DEI is about equity and inclusion, and really it's about us remembering we're human. And
Mm,
this pandemic has reminded us how connected we all are. Um, uh, when we talk about, this is a racist term and that's not a racist term, that's true. But if we can learn how to remember we're human is actually a question that all of us are asking collectively as a culture as we're coming out of this, like, can I be close to you? Can I touch you? Can I be, what does a cough mean? What does it mean to be close? And I think that piece of remembering we're human is a collective question. So for me, um, this work feels expansive. I look at the work I'm working on right now, the Chronically UnderTouched Project, and dealing with touch and Black men and our emotional bodies. I look at the Unrested Labor Project with this land project of artists and retreat. I look at um, if I have ever seen a time in my life for particularly African heritage folks to show up like they've never shown up before, I see that as right now. And I know people are like, wow, that was
Mhm.
really good in Obama era. That was huge. I was there. I was in Washington. He got elected and I saw that. But what I saw was folks getting so excited about a president they got a little tired and quiet about their own magic, in my opinion. I feel like we got surprised in the Trump era, and I your politics aside, but I got surprised about what does it mean to be in village. And now after George Floyd, I start seeing folks reevaluating what it means to be in village with each other. So for me, I feel like it's going to shape like it has been, but shape in a new way. Um,
Mhm.
the country we live in, the communities we live in. I feel like it is the future, and I say that not
Yeah.
lightly. I think that the thinking I'm seeing, and the generation coming is, I feel like there's the future is us all trying to figure out how to be human again, and that is the future of my work, which is DEI work and beyond holistic resistance. And I feel like that is a question I'm answering, and I feel like the
Mhm.
responses are being pretty profound in the workshops and the consulting work and in this retreat we're building here in Northern California. And so I feel like to me, the future is pretty bright. It's not without work, but
Yeah.
it's to me one of the essential pieces that I feel America and I think our country has been struggling for a while, but is needing right now, and it's kind of admitting how much they need it. So I think that the next year is going to be a big indicator of people where you want to figure out how to do that. And I think that I am really excited to support thinking that allows us to remember that we're
Mhm.
humans here to be really connected to each other, not to exploit each other, but to be with and then be in village. I think that's going to be something that's going to be fundamentally critical in the next
Yeah.
several years in front of us, definitely.
Yeah, I'm also reminded that any life worth with living and living well is not without work. So I'm here to do the work and I'm here for the journey.
Mm,
Um, let's end off like this because I feel like me and you could talk for hours, but I don't
this
do
is true.
Joe Button. I don't do those. I forget what his name is. Who the Rogan podcast where they speak for 3 hours. I would love to, but I don't know if people
I
would
feel
listen that
you.
long.
I feel you.
Uh, what projects are you currently working on, and where can people find you?
Yeah. So you can find me at holisticresistance.com. I am working on this land project for retreat for Black artists in Northern California, and that has blown my mind. I feel like for me on the West Coast, there's no equivalent space that's being curated for Black folks, off grid, natural retreat space to be creative artists and be in community and to build the future. And I'm working on a documentary about the chronically undertouched Black male body, and that film is shaking me to my core. And I'm excited. I think it's about 2 year project. We're about 8 months in, so we've got only about a year and some change to go. And those two projects to me are not only shaping me, but they're really defining my own spirit in some ways that I didn't see before. And so those are things I'm excited about. And also too, if folks are like, I'm ready to go, Aaron, I have a phone number that's a public facing phone number. They can text me. Well, Aaron, let's go. Where's this thing at? I'm an artist. Let's go. And that phone number I can I give to you or give here on the air here, so y'all can have access to it to say, let's go. Just text me, let's
Yeah,
go, and we can talk to my
go
assistant.
ahead,
We can get
drop it
at it.
in, drop it on the air, and
All
then
right, yeah.
also don't worry if you're driving. I'm going to get all the show notes from Aaron, and I'm gonna put all of his links where you can connect with him if you don't get it while you're driving. So please don't text and drive or try to get off to the road. We'll get it for you later as well. Go ahead, Aaron, drop that number.
Yeah, so this number is for the folks that are ready to get at it right now and get connected. That's 760-885-6740. Just text that number. Let's go. I'm going to get at it and share what your project is, what you're up to, and I will be in contact with you. I'm about getting at it now. I'm not about wasting time, so reach for it, brother.
There we go. There you go. Let's make the magic happen. Aaron, it has been an honor and pleasure for me just to be on this episode with you today. I know you breathe life into everybody each and every day that you wake up to do this work, but you've definitely done it for me today and for our audience. And for that, we want to thank you. We're grateful for you. And we're going to pour back in whatever way we can to support you. So I
Mm,
can't wait for this episode to air so that we can connect on many different levels. I don't know what I'm gonna do with you in the future as far as work, but I know the universe will call our spirits to work together in some capacity or way. So
mm.
thank you, brother, for the work that you're doing.
Thank you. It's an honor to be with you. So glad we've met. This is a gift for me too.
Yeah. And that's it for us today, ladies and gentlemen. So make sure you check out all the links that I put in the show notes, support, and we'll see you on the next time.